Welcome to Quicksand, the most important news in pharma and biotech this week. The billionaire founder of Insys Therapeutics was arrested on U.S. charges he participated in a scheme to bribe doctors to prescribe a fentanyl-based cancer pain drug, marking a step by authorities to fight the opioid epidemic. John Kapoor, Insys' majority shareholder, who stepped down as chief executive in January, was charged with engaging in conspiracies to commit racketeering, mail fraud, and wire fraud in an indictment filed in federal court in Boston. He was added as a defendant in a case against 6 former Insys executives and managers, including former chief executive Michael Babich. Following a court hearing in Phoenix, Kapoor, 74, was released on a $1 million bond. Arizona-based Insys, which has been in settlement talks with the U.S. Justice Department, declined to comment. The charges marked a major escalation of investigations related to Subsys, an under-the-tongue spray that contains fentanyl, an addictive synthetic opioid. Prosecutors said beginning in 2012, Kapoor, Babich, and others devised a scheme to pay speaker fees and other bribes to medical practitioners to prescribe Subsys. They also sought to defraud insurers into approving payments for Subsys when it was prescribed to patients who did not have cancer, the indictment said. The FDA released 2 draft guidance documents that aim to help drug developers evaluate investigational new drugs for potential drug-drug interactions, or DDIs. FDA says the guidances, which will replace the 2012 draft guidance titled Drug Interaction Studies, Study Design, Data Analysis, Implications for Dosing, and Labeling Recommendations, reflects the agency's effort to help drug developers design DDI studies that provide meaningful clinical information on how to manage risks when a patient is taking more than one medication. In draft guidance document Clinical Drug Interaction Studies, FDA spells out its recommendations on the timing of clinical DDI studies, the design and conduct of such studies, and the reporting and interpreting of such study results, as well as labeling recommendations. In terms of the types of DDI studies, FDA explains prospective studies and retrospective evaluations, DDI studies with index perpetrators and index substrates, DDI studies with expected concomitant drugs, and in silico DDI studies. In the draft guidance document In Vitro Metabolism and Transporter-Mediated DDI Studies, FDA focuses on in vitro approaches to investigating interaction potential between the investigational drugs that involve metabolizing enzymes and/or transporters. It also discusses how in vitro results can help inform future clinical DDI studies. In subsections of the draft, FDA explains the evaluation of metabolism-mediated drug interactions, transporter-mediated drug interactions, DDI potential of metabolites, and labeling recommendations. Prime Minister Theresa May has implied the UK will stay in the European regulatory network during the anticipated Brexit transition period. Delaying the date on which the UK cuts its ties to the European Medicines Agency would give businesses and regulators more time to prepare for the new relationship. Nothing about the transition, or in UK government parlance, implementation phase, is certain, even down to whether such a staggered exit from the EU will happen. The UK wants to leave the EU in 2019, but avoid the cliff edge scenario by maintaining something like the status quo for about 2 years. If the EU agrees, it is unclear how the UK will handle drug and medical device regulation during the transition. May opened the door to the UK's continued time-limited participation in EMA earlier this month by conceding the country will remain under the jurisdiction of the European Court of Justice, or ECJ, during the transition phase. That statement overruled comments by UK Brexit Secretary David Davis just weeks earlier. The shift is important as ECJ jurisdiction and EMA involvement go hand in hand. May's decision to use Brexit to sever UK ties to the ECJ is why the country looks set to leave EMA at some point. A lack of clarity about when that will happen and what will follow, something the UK cannot provide until negotiations with the EU advance, is causing consternation at companies. Without clarity, industry representatives will likely delay investments or reallocate cash to facilities outside the UK. The International Organization for Standardization, or ISO, is revising a series of standards known as Identification of Medicinal Products, or IDMP, standards as part of an effort to simplify the exchange of medicinal product information. ISO IDMP standards cover various aspects of medicinal product descriptions, including the product name, ingredient substances, route of administration, strength, marketing authorization, clinical particulars, packaging, and manufacture. Initially, IDMP was driven by the International Council for Harmonization, but when Japan stopped its active participation in the development of the standards, ISO took over. The standards cover a variety of regulatory activities related to development, registration, and lifecycle management of medicinal products, in addition to pharmacovigilance and risk management, according to ISO. The European Medicines Agency has said it is in the process of implementing the IDMP standards in a phased program based on the 4 domains of master data in pharmaceutical regulatory processes: substance, product, organization, and referential master data. As promising Ebola vaccines from global drug makers GlaxoSmithKline and Merck still await official licenses, China has approved its own shot, co-developed by the Chinese Academy of Military Medical Sciences Bioengineering Institute and domestic vaccine specialist CanSino. Dubbed 85EBOV, the recombinant adenovirus vector-based vaccine is the first shot based on the strain behind the recent epidemic in West Africa in 2014, the deadliest outbreak in recorded history. The Chinese vaccine maker revealed a 65,000 square meter, 70 million dose capacity manufacturing site, which the company said is in compliance with the World Health Organization's cGMP requirement. The vaccine differs from programs at GSK and Merck because those companies' vaccines are developed to express the glycoprotein of the Ebola virus identified during the disease's discovery back in 1976. CanSino says the 2 virus types are very similar, but slight differences could allow its shot to provide better protection in the real world. Because the Ebola crisis has died down, China's FDA approved 85EBOV without a phase 3 test after putting the product on its expedited review list in April. In a 500-participant phase 2 trial in Sierra Leone, the results of which were published earlier this year in The Lancet, the vaccine elicited strong antibody response in volunteers within 28 days. Researchers noted that the responses, though still existent, decreased significantly at day 168, a finding the team said is consistent with previous tests on Merck's vaccine candidate in Africa and Europe. Thank you for listening to Quicksand, Episode 3, October 30th, 2017.